So this lesson, before I start, there's a couple things I want to tell you because this is a difficult lesson. I'm not going to stand up here and try to I would love to act like it's really easy and hopefully motivate you guys. You can all do it. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to lie to your face. This is difficult stuff. In my opinion, this is maybe the hardest stuff we've done this semester. So I kind of have all this stuff to get you started to help you guys before we even start kind of getting the right mental space. So these problems are, in my opinion, typical Algebra 2 problems. Overall, the problem is very difficult. However, if you can break it down, each step really isn't too bad. Now, again, I'm not saying each step is easy by any stretch of the imagination, but if you were good at elimination that we did back before Thanksgiving, section 2, if you were good at that, then this shouldn't be too bad if you can look at each individual step. The problem is there's about 4 steps to this. I think the hardest part about these is that they take so long. And since they take so long, there's a lot of extra work and there's a lot of extra little places where you can miss a little negative sign and it makes the whole rest of your problem not only wrong, but it makes it a nightmare. So, in my opinion, the hardest part is staying organized, taking your time. Don't make those small mistakes. So again, I'm going to kind of show you how I do it, where I stay organized. But if you're one of those people that tries to do 2 steps at once or do some of the stuff in your head or kind of write stuff down and then cross it out without rewriting and stuff like that. I'm not saying you can't do that. It's just going to be a struggle today. So before we even start, I have a couple tips. And I guess before I start, I should mention this is what the problems are looking like. Before, we had 2 equations with 2 variables. Now we have 3 equations with 3 variables. And that's going to make it a lot more difficult. Technically, as long as you have the same number of variables as you do equations, you could solve those. So if I gave you 1 equation with 2 variables, then you couldn't solve for x and y. You couldn't do it. If I gave you 2 equations with 3 variables, you wouldn't be able to do it. However, if I gave you 10 equations that had 10 variables, since it's the same number of variables as equations, technically you could solve that. It would just be a nightmare. You use your calculator with something called a matrice, and we're not going to get into that. So in solving these, I gave you some tips that I would like you guys to follow. First off, I'm doing this on every single problem. I'm labeling your equations A, B, and C. I think I started doing that probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I think that's really helped students not only know where things are coming from, but also taking your notes. You can see in your notes, oh, this is this equation. You can refer back to that. It makes it a lot easier to have your notes be organized so you can study and so it can help you with that stuff. Next one, rewrite all your equations. Every single step, rewrite your equations. I know a lot of people with, and you don't have to write this down, but with elimination, when you have negative 2x plus 5y is equal to 10, and your other equation is 4x plus 6y is equal to 11. I know a lot of people that when they multiply, they'll just kind of cross it out, and they'll put negative 4x plus 10y is equal to 20, and then they cross things out this way. If you do that, that's fine. Again, I couldn't care less. But on these problems, if you try to do that, it's going to start getting really messy. So again, rewrite everything. Take your time with that. Don't take any shortcuts. I know there's going to be times where you guys don't want to take as much time. You're kind of in a hurry. You're over it. You want to get done. Try not to take any shortcuts with this. Give yourself a lot of space. I probably shouldn't put that or take it off because I was thinking when I was in high school, there was people that tried to do it in a really small area on their notebook, and it didn't go well. With you guys, since I print out the notes and since I have the test is all printed out, I will just make sure I'll probably give you, at the very least a half page. I might give you a full page for these. One of the other big things, do the worksheet for this. The problem with these equations or solving these is that it takes a long time. And so to get really good at this, you need to have practice. Just like anything else, just like sports, just like other math problems, just like instruments, you need to practice to get good at these. The problem is if I gave you 10 questions on your worksheet, that could take an hour. So on the notes, we only go through 5 of these. On your worksheet, you only have 4 of them. So you don't have a lot of practice, so you need to make sure you're doing that practice. One of the things I used to tell students is the first 3 times you do these problems by yourself, you'll probably get them wrong. So you should probably make sure you do it those 3 times on a worksheet where it doesn't matter. instead of skipping that and then doing it on a test and then missing all those test questions. Make sure I always consider it to other people. That helps with this and math. Make sure you bring your math teacher treats. That's not my rule. That's from the textbook. I didn't make that. Don't do drugs. Obviously, I know you guys want to try performance-enhancing math drugs. We're going to steer clear of those. You can do this on your own. And obviously, the most important one, only you can prevent forest fires. Those are going to be on the test. Make sure you know those. Those are all going to help you on these, every single one of them. Not one is more importantly than the other. Well, the last one is the most important, obviously. All right. So I know this is a big intro, and also one of the things I didn't write down, but I'll tell you. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this because I don't want people to like just quit on this. But one thing that I have found, there are times that people struggle with this, and so they work really hard to try to figure out how to do this, and it never clicks. And then when they take the test, they miss these, but they also didn't take time to study for anything else, and so they do really poorly on the test. So basically what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that I recommend this by any means, but if you're one of those students that you're just trying to work as hard as you can to get a C, or if you're just trying to pass this class so you can have credit so you can move on to geometry, if that is you, pay attention today. You might figure it out. It might click. There's a good chance it will. But don't stress over this. If you do everything else right on the test, if you really study for everything else, you do well on everything else, you're not going to fail this test just because of this topic. Now, again, ideally, you'll pay attention, and even if you don't know how to do it, you'll know enough of it that you can get some partial credit, and that'll help. But basically, I want to be honest with you guys, and I don't want anyone to like lose sleep and stress and study a bunch on this and then end up doing poorly on the rest of the test just because they're so stressed about it. All right. So to get started on these first ones, we're going to use elimination. We're going to use this for almost all of them. The only other one we'll do is substitution at the very end, and it's set up nicely where that's the easiest problem we'll do today. Technically, you could probably do substitution on these other ones. It would just be even worse than what we're doing now, which is very bad. So step one was substitution. Again, I would follow these 4 steps every time. I honestly don't think that these are terrible if you do each step. It's just like I said, some people try to skip around, and you'll see it's a lot of work. That's the biggest thing. It's a lot of work. Since it's a lot of work, a lot of people think this is pretty difficult. So step one, you're going to pick 2 equations. You're going to add them together to get one of your variables to cancel, just like we did with elimination back in section 2, back in algebra 1. Find 2 equations, add them together to get cancel. Their x's to cancel. You want like equal but opposite, a -3 and a +3, so they cancel. Step 2 is really the big step. This is the one where a lot of people make a small mistake. First off, you need to make sure you use the equation that you didn't use. So you're going to do the same thing you did in step 1. You're going to do it over again. But since you started with 3 equations, you used 2 for step 1, you need to use the one you didn't use in step 2. The other equation you use, it doesn't matter. But you need to make sure you use the one you haven't used already. And you have to make sure you cancel the same variable as you did in step 1. That's a big deal. I label those answers. You'll end up with new equations. I label that D and E. And then after this, it's the same stuff you guys know how to do, or the same stuff you've done. You did it on the last quiz. You're going to use elimination with your answers from step 1 and 2. Once you have that, that's going to give you one variable, and then to find the other variables, you're going to sub it into the other equations just like you did before. So, without further ado, let's start on this first one. So, the very first thing I do, and I didn't really put it in my steps, and again, you don't necessarily have to do this, but I think, especially on your notes when you're studying, it really helps when you look back at your notes. It helps you know where all your equations are and which equations you're using. I'm going to label these 3 equations, A, B, and C. I think that helps immensely. I guess I should say, historically, I know that helps students a lot. Because when I started doing that, a lot of students start doing better. So, step 1, we're going to pick 2 of these that when we add them together, we're going to pick them that they cancel. Now, it doesn't matter what variable you want to cancel. I'm going to use x's because if I add a and c together, they're already set up really nicely where the x's cancel. If you looked at a and b and notice they're both y, so you just have to multiply a by -1. You can do that, cancel the y's. Or you could cancel the z's. It does not make any difference. There are probably 10 to 15 different ways to do this problem. They'll all get you the same answer. I'm going to cancel the x's first. So I'm going to add a and b to get, or sorry, a and c. And so on my step 1, I write down a, and I copy that down. X plus y plus 2z is equal to 3. And then equation c is what I'm adding to that. So I have negative x minus 2y plus z is equal to 10. Again, a really good way to stay organized. Now, one thing I will also say, I maybe said this before, but I put my little cross through my z. The main reason I do that is because it looks like my 2's. And so if I don't put that cross, I start thinking it's a 2 and I start missing problems. Again, a lot of this is about staying neat and organized. So once you have that, now we're going to add those together. So my x's cancel. I have positive y minus 2 is negative 1y. 2z plus 1z is 3z. And 3 plus 10 is 13. So that's our new equation. We're going to use that in step 3. I label that equation D. Again, you don't have to. It's you. But it's nice, especially in your notes, to know exactly. Like now when you look at step 1, you know exactly, oh, I used the first one in the last equation. Now before I move on, again, I want to take this slow. Is everyone okay with that step 1? Hopefully not too bad. Again, I'm not standing up here and saying it's super easy, but hopefully it's not any more difficult than what we did before with 2 equations and 2 variables. So step 2, it's not any harder than step 1. You just have to remember those couple rules. I did not use equation B, so I have to use equation B in step 2. And if you cancel x's in the first one, you have to cancel x's in step 2. If you don't do that, you'll find out really quickly in step 3 that it does not work out very well. So I need to cancel my x's. If you want to use a and b, you can. I'm going to use b and c because with c, the x is already negative, so I just have to multiply everything by 2. So on step 2, my b is 2x plus y plus 3z is equal to 7. Nothing changed with that. With my equation c, I have to multiply it by 2. So down here, I put in front of my c, I put a 2. Now again, you don't have to do that. I'm not counting you wrong for doing that. If you don't do that, I guess I should say. I'm not going to count you wrong. However, especially in your notes, now you can see, oh, this equation is this last one, but I multiplied everything by 2. So I have negative 2x minus 4y plus 2z is equal to 10, equal to 20. Even that 10 needs to get multiplied by 2. And again, before I used to label everything like this, I would have students that would look at this and they had no idea where did that come from. Well, now if you label, you know it's equation C and you know it came from multiplying by 2. I think that's very helpful, especially in your notes. So once we have that, we do it exactly like we did with step 1. The x's cancel. Positive 1 minus 4 is negative 3y. 3 plus 2 is 5z. 7 plus 20 is 27. And again, as you can imagine, I'm labeling that equation E. Again, take a break. Everyone okay with that one? All right with that step. Again, same thing as step 1. You just have to remember, cancel the same variable and make sure you use that one equation you haven't done so already. So we use equation C twice. That's okay. We can use equations twice. We just have to make sure everyone is used at least once. So now when you get down to step 3, we take that equation D and E and we combine those to cancel another variable. So again, it doesn't matter. You can cancel the z's. I'm going to cancel my y's because I have a negative y and a negative 3. So all I would have to do is multiply this D equation by negative 3. That was going to be positive 3 and negative 3, so the y's would cancel. You can do the same thing with z. It doesn't make any difference. Now again, when I write this down, I say my d, I'm going to multiply by -3. So that's positive 3y minus 9z is equal to -39. Use a calculator. Honestly, hand to God, the only reason I didn't use a calculator for that is because this is the 4th time I've done it. Then my equation E, I don't have to change it all, so I don't need to write anything in front of that. So I have -3y plus 5z is equal to 27. And just like every other problem, we combine those. 9z, or -9 plus 4 plus 5 is -4. -39 plus 27, I want to say, is -12. Divide each by -4, we end up getting z is equal to positive 3. So we did all that work to finally get one of my variables. Yes? So it's -3 times this positive 3. Thanks for, if you see anything like that, please ask. Because the last class, I butchered one of these. Like, I messed it up, I think, 3 times in a row. Every time I'd correct it wrong. So if you see anything, let me know. And again, that's why I like these notes this way, because I know this is my d equation times -3. So go up to d, multiplied by -3. Last but not least, it's not a bad idea to check your signs like that. So I know if I multiply this whole thing by a negative, that means every sign changes. Negative changes to positive, positive to negative, positive, negative. It's always good to check that, because any little negative that you make a mistake on is not good. Yes, big C.
Wouldn't you be multiplying it by a positive 3 because the bottom was already -3?
If you multiply it by positive 3 times -y is -3, so you have 2 negatives. Good question, thank you. And again, if you have questions, you need to ask them, because I'm scared that if you sit there and you're like, maybe I'll figure it out, it'll get worse and worse. So make sure you ask those. The good news is, the hardest part is done. Now from here, just like we did before, we're going to plug that z in, and we're going to find the other variables. Now first, don't plug them into the original equations where you have 3 variables. You could, and then you'd have to use elimination or substitution again. It would be terrible. Instead, take this z and plug it into either d or e, because those are the ones we only have 2 variables. So if we know one of them, we can find the other one. So I'm going to plug it into d. So I'm going to plug in, and again, I note that down, that's d. I have -y plus 3 times 3 is equal to 13. That's -y plus 9 is equal to 13. Oops. If I subtract 9 from both sides, I get -y is equal to positive 4. Since it's a -y, you divide by -1 to get that y by itself. We get y is equal to 4. So we have 2 equations, or 2 variables. We're getting there. We're in the right direction. Now is where, yes, question.
Wait, wouldn't that be negative?
Yes, absolutely. I've done this. I think that's the 3rd time I've made that mistake. Yes, absolutely. 4 divided by -1 is indeed -4. You guys should all know that. It's a joke because I messed it up. Yes.
So if we're doing like step 3,
Yeah.
if we do this on a test, could you just find, like in step 4 we gotta find the y, can you just find it in step 3 as well?
Do you mean like, so in step 3 you could cancel the z's instead to get your y?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in step 3, if you want to cancel your z's, you just get your y, that's fine. And then you plug your y back in to find your z in this step. Or you could use elimination twice. I just think that's harder. Does that answer your question? Okay. So now that we know z and y, provided we're correct, which is making me significantly more worried, now is where you go back. We know 2 of the variables. We need to find the 3rd one. So go back to your original ones. It doesn't matter which one you pick, whichever one is easiest. Honestly, I am So I have z and y, so I'm finding my x. So I'm going to use this first one, a, because the x is by itself, so it's going to be a little bit easier. But again, any one of these equations should get you the same answer. So I'm going to use equation A. And equation A is on the floor. My x plus my y, which is -4, plus 2 times my z is 3. That's what we found in step 3. Equal to 3. And now we can solve that for that x. X minus 4 plus 6 is equal to 3. Combine -4 plus 6. You're not canceling those. I'm not adding 4 to the 6. It's not 10. -4 plus 6 is positive 2. Subtract 2, you get x is equal to 1. Last but not least, actually I should wait a second. Are there any questions on that part? Again, step 4, there's kind of 2 steps in step 4, but both of them are the same where you're plugging numbers in that we know to solve for the one that we don't. Last but not least, I want you to put your answer, before I had you guys put your answer in an ordered pair, where you had your x and your y. Now there's 3 of them, so it's called an ordered triple. So I want you to put your answer as an ordered triple. Honestly, I normally would put the answer down here after all my work, but since I don't have any room, I'm just going to put it right here. That way you can kind of see everything. But again, if I were you, there's no reason I'm putting it up there except for the lack of space. Normally I would probably, I guess I could do it like right here. But just to make sure you can see everything. So it goes in alphabetical order. My x comes first. So I have 1. My y is -4. My z is 3. That is your answer. Normally, I tell you guys that if you ever get like a fraction or decimal, that happens sometimes. I assure you on these problems, I will not do that for you. If you get a fraction or decimal, you did something wrong, or I did something wrong. Either way, if you did something wrong, check your work to fix it. If I did something wrong, I will give you 3 points back because that's not what I want to do. Last but not least, I'm going to tell you this. Again, this is just for that one person that's working really, really hard to just get the grade 1 letter grade above. So if you're trying really hard to get an A, pay attention to this. And if you are willing to do just about anything to get to that D- so you get credit for this, you can take, just like before, that 1, -4, and 3, and you can plug it into every one of these equations to check your work. Because 1, -4, 3 better make every single one of them work. So if you plug it into number 1, or the equation A, you should end up getting it equal to 3. Then plug it into equation B, you should get 7. Plug it into C, you should get 10. It's got to work for all 3 of them. Again, I know that's a lot of extra work, so I know a lot of you guys won't do it. That's your prerogative. But I do want to make sure I say that so you know it's an option. All right, if you're working ahead and you started number 2, that's fine. If you haven't started number 2 yet, I'm going to tell you, if you want to follow along with what I'm going to show you, cancel, still have my highlighter. Cancel the Z first. If you want to, you could cancel the X's. And now again, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could also technically cancel the Y's. But I'm going to do it by canceling the Z's first because I think that's the easiest. You can do it however you want, but make sure you realize my steps are going to be canceling Z. That said, again, you still might do it a little bit differently. Like I said, there's a bunch of different ways to do these. Do these on your own. I'm going to stop in a second or in a little bit. I'll do step 1. So if you get hung up on step 1, I'll do that for you so you can see it. Then after a little while, I'll do step 2. After a little while, step 3, so on and so forth. real quick. Some of you guys are already past this, and you could have done this in step 1 as well. You might have done something differently. I get that. But if you did the way I've been doing it or the way I did it for this one, when I did my B and C for step 2, I multiplied the B by 3. And again, you could have used A and C. That would have worked fine. But since B already has a negative Z, then I just have to multiply everything by 3. If you'd used A, you'd have to multiply everything by negative 3, which is fine. But I multiply everything by 3 with B, which gives me a negative 3x and a negative 3x. Those do not cancel. Negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6x. The z's cancel because it's a negative and a positive, but if both of them are negative or both of them are positive, they do not cancel. Then the other thing in step 3, I know some of you guys have run into this already, but when you cancel, and again, you could have multiplied your E by negative 1, doesn't make any difference, but you end up with negative 30 plus 30. That's just 0. That's weird, but it does happen. That's not wrong. And then you divide both sides by 10. 0 divided by 10 is just 0. Again, I know that doesn't happen a lot. Honestly, again, I always say check your work if that happens, just because I always want you to check your work. It's always good to double check. But that's totally correct in this one. All right. Good job asking questions. Those of you that had questions, again, that's the way you're going to get good at this. Doing one on your own, making sure you know how to do those. It's super easy to do these problems when I do them and you write this down. Usually it makes a lot of sense when I do them and you copy it down. But you have to make sure you can do them on your own. So thank you for those of you who asked questions. Speaking of, that said, are there any other questions on this before we move on? All right. So obviously, we still have 2 more questions left. Before we do those, I'll tell you, this is it. This is as hard as it gets. I guess the next question you can maybe say is a little harder, but the only thing that's harder is there's 2 things to remember. It's not even math. You just have to remember it. But this is the hardest part of today. Again, we go into substitution at the end, which is significantly easier. You actually kind of know how to do that already, but that's it. So again, I know some of you guys are like, you say that's it like it's easy, and that's not what I'm saying. I just want to make sure you realize a lot of lessons, it gets harder and harder. This doesn't. This is the hardest it gets. Just maybe obvious it is pretty hard. So first thing with this one, I apologize. This first equal sign should not be there. You don't have to worry too much about it because I'm going to rewrite all of these anyways here in a second. But you can take that out. That should not be there at all. If you want to label these A, B, and C, you can. We'll get to that in a second. But the difference with this one, the first equation has all three variables, x, y, and z, but the second equation doesn't. And neither does the third. Now this one, both of them are like that. Obviously, again, you can have anything. Maybe two of the equations have all the variables and one of them doesn't. There's very many different things you can get with this. But for what we're given here, the b equation doesn't have a z, and the c equation doesn't have a y. So the first thing, again, this is not much harder. You just have to remember, if you ever don't have variables, I would rewrite all of it and put zeros in for a placeholder for those other variables. So for a, you don't do anything. We have 2x plus 3y minus 2z is equal to -1. For b, though, that's where you have to put in a 0 for your z. So we have x. Again, I'm not changing anything else. They don't have a z, so I'm putting a 0z in for that. Make that a little bit more nice. And my last one, C, now they don't have a Y. So again, I'm not changing anything. I'm just putting kind of a placeholder in there, 0Y. And again, that doesn't change anything because 0Y is the same thing as just not writing 0. So that's the first thing that's different. Yes. Yes. Yeah, that equal sign, I must have been just going too quickly. So once you have that, we do this like any other problem. The only other thing you have to remember, and it's actually a really interesting one. If we had more time and this wasn't such a heavy lesson, I would tell you guys to try to cancel the y first or the z. But if you don't have, if there's, basically to make it less confusing, you have to cancel the x's in this one. In all the other problems, I said you could do the x or the y or the z. In a problem like this, you have to cancel the variable that is in every problem. So this one, I cannot cancel the y's because this one doesn't have a y. And I cannot cancel the z's because this one doesn't have a z. If you want to try it, doing it where you cancel the x, or if you cancel the y or the z, it's actually, in my opinion, it's kind of interesting. You'll find very quickly that it doesn't work. But take my word for it, you have to cancel one that has that's the variables in every single one. So we have to cancel the x because all of them have an x. So the good news is it's not terrible for ours. My a, so I'm going to combine my a and b first to get the x's to cancel. So my a is 2x plus 3y minus 2z is equal to -1. My b, I need to make sure I multiply by -2, not just +2. It's got to be negative so it can cancel out this 2x, the +2. So -2 times b is -2x minus 10y. -2 times 0 is just 0, so that doesn't change anything. And -2 times 9 is -18. So when we cancel those, the -2's cancel. We end up with -7y. -2 plus 0 is just -2. -1 minus 18 is -19. That's equation D. So from here on out, once you know that you're canceling the x's first, everything else in this whole problem is the same as what we did before. I combine my a and b to cancel my x's. So I need to use, in step 2, I need to use equation C, and I still need to cancel the x's because that's what I did in step 1. So I'm going to use b and c, but that means I need to multiply b by 5. So we have positive 5x plus 25y. 5 times 0 is just 0, so that's still 0. Z is equal to 45. This gets you some numbers that are a little bit bigger. That's fine. That happens in these. There's one on the homework. And granted, you guys might do it a different way. But there's one on the homework that when I did it, I ended up with like a -254 or something crazy that was bigger. Don't worry. They'll work themselves down. Your final answers won't be too crazy big. And then my C is -5x plus 0y plus 4z is equal to 4. X is canceled just like we wanted. 25 plus 0 is 25. 0 plus 4 is 4. 45 plus 4 is 49. That's what I used as my equation E. Yes. Yes. Because I want to cancel my x's. And so if I multiply my b by 5, I'll get a 5x, and then c has a negative 5, so it cancels nice. Now again, technically, you could have used a and c. You would just have to multiply the a by 5 and the c by 2, so then the x's cancel with the 10 x's. It's possible, it's just a little bit more difficult than if you use b, where all I have to do is multiply b by positive 5. Does that make sense? Cool. Thank you. So now I have D and E. Now those are the two that I'm going to try to use to cancel. Again, you can cancel whatever you want. I would highly recommend Z in this one. So to do that, I'm going to multiply D by 2. So negative 14y minus 4z is equal to negative 38. Again, I would use my calculator on that. I would have not known that, except for I've done it a bunch of times already today. And your E equation, you don't have to multiply by anything because you already have the 4z. So my z's cancel. Negative 14 plus 25 is 11, I believe. Negative 14 plus 25 is 11. Negative 38 plus 49 is also 11. So that works out really nicely. My y ends up being 1. So now we're going to take that one and plug it back in. Somebody asked earlier, do you have to plug it back in step 4, or can you keep, when you plug y in for D or E, can you do that in step 3? It doesn't make any difference. I couldn't care less. Again, I don't even care if you use these steps. I just think it's a good way to split it up and to look at, make it a little bit easier if you look at each little step. So I'm going to plug my y in for D. Oops. So negative 7 minus 2z is equal to negative 19. Add 7 to both sides. I get negative 2z is equal to negative 12. My z ends up being positive 6. Now, again, I have my y and my z. Now I plug that back in. And again, pick one that's easier for you. So honestly, for me, you can pick either equation B or C. Those are the easiest ones because they only have two variables. I'm going to pick equation B. That way I don't even have to worry about my z being wrong. Because if my y is 1, I'll just pick equation B. So my equation B is x plus 5 times 1 is equal to 9. X plus 5 is equal to 9 minus 5 minus 5. I get x is equal to 4. So my final answer, I have 4, 1, and 6. Now again, there are several other ways to do that problem. Honestly, there may be, I don't think there's any easier ways to do it, but there might be some little tricks since this is kind of a unique problem, but I don't like that. I'd rather do it the same as every other problem. That way you only have to memorize one way of doing it. How is that? Everyone okay with that so far? Some of you guys, some of you weirdos might actually think this is kind of fun. I am one of those people. Kind of satisfying to have a whole page worth of mathematical work and get the right answer. That said, I will say, check your work as you go. Check your little mistakes, because the only thing that's worse than a problem that takes forever is if you take forever and then get the wrong answer. I hate that. Yeah. All right. Now, don't write this down right now. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to erase it. We're going to forget about it. Technically, if you want to struggle through this, you could set this up like the one we just did, where we have 0x plus y plus 2z is equal to 0, and 0x plus 0y plus z is equal to 2, where you sub zeros in for your missing variables. Technically, you could do it that way. But instead, I just want to make sure you guys realize this. If you look at every other problem we have done, we work so hard, we do 3 full steps of borderline torture before we finally get what one of our variables is equal to. And once we have that, then it's not as bad. We just have to plug that in and solve. So if you look at the one we have, they essentially did those first 3 steps for us because they're telling us that z is equal to 2. They're telling you right here, this is an equation that's equal to 6, this equation is equal to 0, but this one is just z and it's equal to 2. So we can already start at this point from our other equations. So if I know z is 2, again, already I know some of my answer. You could do it right away. My z is 2. So to find the other ones, take z and plug it back in to solve. Well, this one, all it has is a z and a y. So if you plug that in, y plus 2 times 2 is equal to 0. Y plus 4 is equal to 0. If you subtract 4, y is equal to negative 4. So that's my y value. And now I have my y and my z, so I can plug it into this first one to get my x. X plus 2 times negative 4 plus 3 times 2 is equal to 6. X minus 8 plus 6 is equal to 6. X minus 2 is equal to 6. Add 2 to both sides. You get x is equal to 8. So I know I went a little bit quickly through that, but it's just plugging numbers in. It's just plugging in. We plugged z for 2 in this one before it. Then we got our y. Once we had our y and our z, we plugged in the other one. Again, that's the 4th or 5th time we've done that today in class. Now, some of you guys might wonder, well, what if I have z is equal to 2, but these 2 equations still have the x, y, and the z? And the answer is, you're not going to have any of those. Technically, you could still, I would sub in z, and then end up giving me 2 equations, 2 variables, and then I would use elimination. So you still can solve it. It's possible. And if you're curious, I'll totally show you. There'll be time. We'll bond, high five, get matching tattoos and stuff. But you won't have any of those on the test. On the test, again, I mentioned this before. There's not going to be a ton of these on the test. We don't have time for that, and I don't want to put a ton of the hardest stuff on a test. So I'm guessing you'll maybe, at the very most, you'll have 3, probably more like 2. One of them is going to be like this. I mean, obviously, instead of z, it might be the x is equal to a number or something, but you're going to have it where you have the answer to one of them. The other equation only has 2 variables, and the first one or one of them has all 3. Any last-minute questions on these?